Okay, we are here. We're just going to give it a moment to figure out what's going on. If anybody is here with me, I'm here by myself, which would be fine. But I know last time there was some feedback that if we schedule it, it may be a little easier. And again, we're going to be just chatting more generally tonight. Excuse me, now you're seeing those pauses. Chatting more generally tonight, I do have some topics that we can chat about that I would like to chat about potentially, but much more casually. I do have hopes that in the future, post strikes, this stream functionality could become beneficial to us, but I don't want to speak on that until we hear more about the SAG agreement's potential on Monday, hopefully. So, knock on wood that we'll get some good news there. If you are joining and want to grab a beverage, I know about everybody says grab a beverage, but I have a beverage, admittedly. And just because it doesn't show the cool can when I'm drinking, it is a beer, but it's a beer I found last year during Beer Fest in Chicago. It's from Moore's Brewery. It's their session ale, and I'm probably mispronouncing that because I'm not really a beer connoisseur, but it is delicious. And they also have, I can't remember the name of it. It comes in a green can and it has like a honeydew melon aftertaste to it. And I absolutely love it. And I know you can buy them at the Lincoln Park Benny's, and that's all I've got. So that's kind of where we're starting for the evening. So I guess we'll give it a couple minutes for people to kind of sprinkle in before we really get into anything good or the meat and potatoes. I mean, we can't get into anything really good without anybody else here. I mean, we can talk about things for sure, but it'll just be a little bit more one sided. I also want to caveat that again, it is a Saturday night, so I have no real control over the ambient noise. And also, it's a little warmer than it has been the last week or so. So if I start to sweat, we're going to have to deal with it in whatever way is needed. So if you are here, please feel free to say hi or to jump into the chat so that we can have more conversation based stuff. But I also recognize as a longtime internet lurker that you may not be comfortable with that. And I totally understand that as well. Do not worry. I think one of the most important things I have on my radar is that next week is Banned Books Week. I live by a road. It is what it is. So next week is Banned Books Week. And I don't really have anything on my schedule in terms of like activities that I have planned related to Banned Books Week. I do have some bookish related activities in my personal life next week, but nothing Banned Books Week specific. But I'm going to be very, very interested because I believe usually ALA releases its top challenged and banned books of the year list around Banned Books Week. So I'm going to be very, very interested to see that list this year. I know I was very interested to see it last year. I know it's been very contentious the last couple of years. We've talked about it multiple times over here. So very interested to see what that list is looking like, if it's changed at all from the last couple of years. I know genderqueer has been very high on the list for the last couple of years. I read it last year in an effort to have some familiarity with what people were finding issue with in it. And I lost my train of thought there, but I found it interesting because I went in expecting having some preconceived notions about what people were probably going to have issue with in the book that was causing it to be higher on the list. And I want to be absolutely clear that I do not believe in banning books, nor do I think this particular title should be banned. But I found it interesting because I found the frankness with which it discussed human bodies, especially human bodies during this very delicate age. I found that that was probably as troubling for a lot of people reading the book and as challenging for them in terms of worldview as a lot of the more LGBTQIA themes that people are coming after more generally as well. And I just found it interesting and of note that that was the case. So, Banned Books Week is next week. We will get that list. I will be very interested if anyone knows of anything going on in their communities for Banned Books Week, if anyone has been having ongoing support of their library boards and their libraries in relation to Banned Books Week. I know that it has been a contentious couple of weeks in Illinois specifically in relation to ban books because of some of the bomb threats that have occurred at area libraries. And I don't know all that went on there or is going on there. But when I was in elementary school, I had multiple bomb threats at my school. And it is scary, especially knowing in the current environment that there is some expectation that that could be an active life threat. So I am obviously in support of librarians and teachers and everyone really supporting books in their communities, which is everyone. So, anyway, that is, kind of what's going on next week. So, let me know if there are banned books on your radar that you're reading, that you're supporting, initiatives in your communities, things you're personally doing, anything that you know of would be really interested in hearing how everyone is kind of approaching Banned Books Week in this very prescient, I don't think that's the word I want, climate. Yeah. So I am considering doing a feature on banned books in shorts this week, but I honestly don't know if I'll get that done or not. So we will see. But I really do want to acknowledge Banned Books Week in some way. So that is what it is. Let me see potentially if we can get some more people to come hang out with us. In the interim, if anybody wants to share what they're reading right now, I just finished, as you probably saw, Witch of Wild Things. I am starting Last Sunrise in Eterna by Amparo Ortiz, and am hoping to get my copy of Vampires of El Norte in the mail this week. I did not get my library book read in time. And so then I went and used my Penguin Random House rewards points to get a copy. So super official, I know, but sometimes you just don't get to the library books in time and there is a hold list. And what are you going to do? I am already sweaty. That is great. Perfect. Just what we want. Maybe, I don't know. I just worry that if I turn on any like air circulation, that it will impact the sound too much. So I don't know. I do have some more topics in my pocket, but I was hoping some more people would join us, but it's okay if not. Is just kind of experimental, so we'll see. But and it is kind of that last nice weekend, like that bridge between summer and fall in terms of weather. So it's all experimental for sure. Another thing I saw, and I hesitate to talk about this because I don't really know a whole lot about it, but I was like scrolling TikTok today, like you do, and I saw someone has already potentially, hi, hello. Oh, weight of blood. There you go. That's a hit if it's two times in a month. And hello, thanks for popping over, especially from the UK. So feel free to direct wherever you feel called. But I saw on TikTok that someone has already published, self-published a book about or inspired by the Taylor Swift Travis Kelsey relationship. And I don't like that. That makes me feel kind of weird. I don't really like real people fan fiction because it feels like ethically, morally icky. And don't get me wrong, I was 13 years old once. I have read some Orlando Bloom fan fiction in my day. I will admit to it. But yeah, it just I don't know. Can you hear that outside? And I guess, Phoebe, I assumed that you meant the Tiffany D. Jackson Weight of Blood, but I saw that there is another Weight of Blood on Goodreads. Was it the Tiffany D. Jackson Weight of Blood that you have reread and loved, or was it the another author? Just curious. Okay, great. I realized maybe I shouldn't assume, but that's the only um one that sticks out in my head. So tell me more because that's been on my loose TBR since it came out and I just haven't got to it. I'm pretty sure she wrote, let me double check because I don't want to misspeak, but I think she wrote White Smoke. Yes, yes, I really enjoyed White Smoke. So have meant to get to that as well. White Smoke definitely had that twist to it too, which was really fun because it wasn't exactly what I was expecting and it really carried that tension really well. I did a feature Friday on it. Who knows how long ago now. So, but yeah, definitely liked that one. So, sorry, I'm going to read as I throw it up. Yes, Monday is Not Coming, I know is definitely almost like modern classic YA status at this point, I think, without having read it, but I see it mentioned a lot. Yeah, and heartbreaking. definitely. She does a really good mix of the, like, real explorations with, like, really well-drawn characters, and there's just so much balance and tension in at least White Smoke, and I can't remember if I read another by her as well, but yes. Excuse me, I've got phlegm in my throat clearly, so maybe I shouldn't be drinking this beer, but here we are. So, if anybody else is reading anything good as you hop on, feel free to share. We're just kind of casually chatting. I was talking about having seen on TikTok today that someone has already put out a loosely based on the, well, I don't know how loosely, I haven't read it, so I can't say that, but a book based on the Taylor Swift Travis Kelsey relationship and how that, veers into the territory of real person fan fiction in my mind, and just kind of the unsure, how I'm kind of unsure about the ethics of that. So if anyone has thoughts on that, feel free to share. I'm not here to ruin anyone's good time, but it just feels like something, doesn't it? And I feel like we've been having these conversations already, even in traditionally published spaces. I just feel like this is a conversation because it is so recent, which means that this was put out so quickly. I think I saw someone on TikTok say it came out or was written in like 3 days. So I, of course, cannot validate that, or I have nothing with which to validate that at this time. So I'm not presenting that as pure fact. But yeah, I don't know. And I feel like it's hard with contemporary because so often you can kind of see the influence or the impetus of a lot of the contemporary romances and kind of where that line is in terms of based on a thing or just like real person fan fiction. So I don't have really fully defined thoughts there, I guess. But it was something that just kind of stuck out to me today as I was avoiding doing actually productive things. So there we are. I also didn't get as much reading done today as I planned. I just couldn't focus today. I haven't been feeling the best this week, so that may have been part of it, but I slept a lot and that was needed, I think. So that's kind of where I'm sitting there. But yeah, so we've got, like I said, we've got banned books week coming up this next week. And I'm sorry to just like repeat for those of you who have been hanging out for a second. I apologize, but that's kind of what's on my radar. And then that I'm going to be very interested to see what goes on with these SAG negotiations starting on Monday. And hopefully they are legitimate negotiations since the WGA got a deal. And if that is the case and they can reach a deal, then I will be picking back up on coverage of adaptations after SAG reaches a deal. Not that, that really matters in the grand scheme of things, but I would be interested if people are still interested in reviews for media that came out during the strikes that I halted talking about. So if that's something that is of interest, let me know. Otherwise, I'm hoping that we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping these creatives are going to be getting fair deals. We obviously saw them, get what the writers get what they asked for in terms of AI. And then did everybody see that there's like a group of writers and the Writers Guild suing about AI and that big list that came out of like all of the books that have been fed through AI without authors' permissions? I think they made it searchable at some point, but I have not searched it. I wonder if I still have it up somewhere. Sorry, I just got a text from my mom about the Signature Lounge closing, or Signature Room, I should say. Which has been news in Chicago because it was just kind of sudden. So we are looking to see. Now, what was interesting, and I have again have not dug fully into these deals or these agreements or anything, but the WGA, I believe, got in their deal, in their contract, that one, they couldn't be forced to use AI. They could choose to use it, but they couldn't be forced to use it. But I think that there were protections in regards to material written by AI wasn't open for adoption or, could be used. So that helps protect authors and creatives in the sense that then we're not like bypassing someone writing a book and then, you know, adapting that book or that property to my understanding. And again, I am surely not a media law expert. I took one class in college, was told that we could make a lot of money pursuing that interest area, and said, absolutely not. It was one of my most difficult college classes. I had a very difficult professor, like one of those kinds of professors that embodies what you went into college expecting the college experience to be, where you could just get called on at any moment in class and be expected to know the answer, which is very anxiety inducing. And I always did the reading, but I was still terrified of being put on the spot and not knowing what I was talking about. And he also, it took me like an entire semester to figure out, but he reminded me of Lewis Black. So that is what it is. But it's interesting because that same year, I took a media ethics class as well. And this was like 2012, 2013. And I feel like everything we talked about in that ethics class is completely moot now. Like things that seemed like very strong industry standards in terms of ethics have like really gone out the window, but I don't know. A lot of things probably have. I recognize I'm kind of just babbling and I'm sorry. I'm I'm trying here. I was just, I'm still learning the technology, learning the live stream thing. I know I'm not really a creator that probably people think of for live streaming, but I am hoping to potentially do some like book chats in the future this way, not like a full book club, but there are some properties that I discuss pretty regularly that we could potentially discuss in a more engagement focused environment. There's a better way to say that, but clearly I didn't find it. Sorry, I'm looking for that database because I think the Atlantic put it out. You can like see how sweaty I am. I'm so sorry. That feels so gross. I'm not finding the I'm not finding the searchable version. I apologize. Another article, and I don't know, maybe I can post them in the comments myself. Do, do, do. There's another article I kind of want to talk about, but I don't necessarily want to screen share it. So let me see. I don't know if that is clickable for you if you are watching, but maybe it appears to be potentially. But it's talking about the title of the article is "The Thirstiest Thing a Man Can Do Is Read," which feels like a very specific point of view. And it's showing like multiple book covers. It's showing Emma Klein's new book. It's showing Patti Smith's Just Kids, and it's showing Infinite Jest, which I feel like has a lot of preconceived notions and baggage related to it. But let me see if there is a part of this that I might read. It says, you've likely heard the oft quoted John Waters adage, if you go home with somebody and they don't have books, don't them. It's a valid point, but in our social media age, where we no longer have to wait until we get to someone's Bushwick studio, They can flaunt that they passed the book dole test ahead of time by carefully curating their feeds. It may be time for Waters to offer an addendum. If you stalk someone and they don't post about their books, don't them. According to a recent study, both men and women find reading to be the biggest green flag behavior for prospective partners. And lately, it seems as if the boys I'm stalking on the internet, the emphasis was not on the stalking, it was on the I was just very delayed there, are taking this stat to heart. As I've turned 30, the evolution of my similarly aged single men on the internet has been a fascinating spectacle to behold. So it kind of just goes on and talks about the idea of performing reading and how, or positioning this thesis basically, that men are reading to gain attention from women. And this seems to be a position that the author is taking because, to some level, their own reading is performative. Sorry, I'm going to powder my face. And that's weird. I recognize it. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna like duck. Do a casual duck. That wasn't weird at all. Absolutely not. But the thesis seems to be that men are reading for the attention of women. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was this idea of going into a bar and seeing a man reading, and then like obviously I went home with him, but then like talking about there. Okay, so here's the sentence. It says Jordan remains skeptical. He was semi-literary, but being at the bar with it definitely felt like he was trying to get someone to talk to him about it. And I've seen this kind of feeling or thesis, that's a strong word, put forward before, that like people that are reading at the bar are like pretentious and performing their reading. And this idea that this article seems to kind of be getting into as being literary or being bookish as a personal brand. And in this case, then using that to kind of flag what kind of person you are for potential partners. But the idea of like reading at the bar, and maybe I'm just taking this personal because I am a single person that does read at the bar to be reading at the bar, because if I'm going alone and I just want to be reading and I'm just trying to be like slightly more social, right? Like get out a little bit or just have a fancier drink than I can make myself at home. I was reading at the bar just last weekend. And if conversation comes of that, cool, great. And then like last weekend it did. I talked to another couple women at the bar about what I was reading and about potentially going to an upcoming book swap. And it just felt like the kind of center of this article in particular was really based around this particular author's own experience and her own perceptions of things. And it felt like a somewhat ungenerous perception to me at some points, because sure, I'm sure there are people that are kind of performing reading in order to kind of signal in some way what kind of person they are, even if it's as simple as like what genres they're reading or whatnot. But I don't think it is generous or fair to say that that's always the case. So I don't know. I don't know what I think of that. And if you have thoughts on that, I would be very interested to hear them. But I just found that really interesting, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. So I also found the kind of center of that article unclear. It felt like a lot of generalizations coming from observations that seem to want to really like strike right to the heart of modern perception of dating culture and how we kind of navigate relationships and meeting people and finding people. And instead, it was almost kind of positing that being a reader or presenting as a reader online was kind of almost disingenuous, and I just felt like that was unfair, and I don't wanna be unfair in response, but it almost felt like there was this confirmation bias in the presentation of these, like, anecdotal observations that meant that they concluded these things because that's what they were looking to conclude, or because they've admitted themselves to presenting. And to be fair, I'm sure we all have in some way curated like what kind of reader we are online, whether that be, to feel or to appear more intellectual or to appear more in line with what is really popular. I don't know. And I don't know that I'm saying that that is bad, clearly, but I just felt like saying that that is the only reason people are presenting as readers online because it is in vogue and you're trying to signal something to others was disingenuous, and it ignores like all of the communities that exist online of readers and the active engagement readers have in online spaces that are genuine. And yeah, I don't know if anyone else has thoughts about that article. And again, it is an opinion piece. It's out of the Atlantic, I believe it was. No, not Atlantic, Bustle. Atlantic was the AI list. But it also like the way it talked about specific books that men may read to signal certain things. One, the use of infinite jest in the image and then not engaging with that at all, like not even touching on books like Infinite Jest or books that might signal certain things to certain people was very interesting, because then why have 3 different book covers? As if that is saying it's projecting or presenting 3 different personas or 3 different things. But then talking about, like, a guy having something like Crying in H Mart or Patti Smith's Just Kids, which I admittedly haven't read, or what was the another book was, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. These very popular titles, and presenting almost this thesis to my interpretation of this article that they are only reading them to signal to women to talk to them in some way instead of having a genuine interest in that material reads a little sexist in some ways. Like the idea that men wouldn't be genuinely interested in that subject matter or in those books. And that's a strong statement. I recognize that, but I don't know. Like, let me know your thoughts. I thought it was a good discussion. So clearly, there's not many of us here to have it, I admit. But even, in the replay, maybe if that is something that happens, I don't know. I'm very loosey goosey here, obviously. But if you're here hanging out, please feel free to say hi, or please do say hi. I know I have my like 90s mom outfit on here. I'm a sucker for a good denim shirt. My friends will tell you that. Denim shirt, denim dresses, chambray all day. So, I feel like I've like flown through my my list of loose topics to discuss. Sorry. But thank you for being here. If you're here, if you're popping in and out sporadically, I don't know. I don't know, I guess, if the scheduled live signals. I try to pay attention to how people I watch, excuse me, show up in my feed with lives. So I don't know if it like boosts it again when the live starts, if it's been scheduled. So if you weren't like initially interested and then you just happen to be around, if you even get that notification, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day. I acknowledge that, but I'm just playing around, seeing what works, what's of interest, and just hanging out. or if anybody else has things they're interested in talking about or discussing, feel free to leave those below as well. Got my book. I know, shocker, right? Oh, Sally Rooney was the other author. Because Sally Rooney is like a popular. People seem to think that those engaging with Sally Rooney aren't always genuinely interested in Sally Rooney. I don't know. Sorry, I'm just browsing this article again. Okay, and this paragraph, I think too, and which is the conclusion, to be fair, does kind of engage with some of this because it says that doesn't mean men aren't actually enjoying a Tessa Moshfe's My Year of Rest and Relaxation or have a true interest in your take on the dramatic ending of The Guest by Emma Cline. I just know that when I post a book on my stories, as I'm wont to do, I'm actively aware of what each title is communicating about me, both to my friends and to the single men who follow me. Because yes, I did enjoy my Jonathan Franzen phase last winter, but I'm also in the market for a boyfriend, ellipses. That's something that probably will need to be unpacked. So to assume that these same men aren't doing the exact same thing feels ludicrous. We're all performative, we're all thirsty, and we're all human, to which I say, happy reading. Which tells me that like the whole premise of this article is set up based, like I said, on kind of like an anecdotal confirmation bias thesis. And like the idea that she was reading Jonathan Franzen to signal to the men or trying to start conversations with men. So then we're like perpetuating this continued idea of kind of like gendered titles or interests that steer to particular genders in terms of authors. I don't know. It just felt like there is some things that can be unpacked in this article that aren't fully unpacked in this article because it's just like a real quick kind of breezy thought piece. But for being a quick kind of breezy thought piece, it has some pretty developed graphics associated with it. So I don't know what we think, like this idea of like thirst trapping with books and if this is a genuine thing. I know that there have been or has been talk of like literary kind of, I don't know what the word is, but people that play specific books with clients, especially like high profile like actresses or models or the ilk, and you see them with like real literary fiction like kind of trendier titles, and not that they're not interested in that, but there have been legitimate articles about like how some of that is kind of placed to present a certain way. And so then we're like getting in this idea of like reading. I know I'm going off on a tangent here. I'm sorry. This is what we get. This is what we get when we're not talking to each other. That we are disingenuous in what we're reading or the conversations around reading, which again ignores the vibrant communities that have existed online around books since the blogging days. So I just don't know really what this article has to be clickbait, right? Like it has to be like at least a little bit clickbait. It's supposed to present something kind of incendiary in order to engage in conversation. But I almost feel thank you. I appreciate you. Thank it. Rambles is the correct word. Rambles is definitely the correct word. So it feels like it's supposed to be incendiary, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you interpret it a different way. It feels like it's supposed to be incendiary, but it almost doesn't have enough of an idea because this article was kind of making the rounds on the app formerly known as Twitter to what I could see. And granted, I'm not spending a lot of time there for obvious reasons, but even like the conclusions or the conversations people were having about it on Twitter didn't seem particularly cohesive, or I don't know that everyone was on the same page about what we were even responding to or conversing about because the article felt kind of generic and sprawling in some ways. So I just don't know about that. I found it very interesting, but I don't know about that. So that is, I guess, unless we have another thought about that where I'll leave it, but I found it very interesting because it just didn't feel particularly generous to anyone involved in the scenario, right? And this idea that in this kind of modern world, it's very hard to meet people, it's very hard to have conversations about things. And so starting with like an easy entry point, like a commonality in terms of what you're reading, is an easy way to kind of bridge that barrier. And so why wouldn't people kind of gravitate toward that? And it's great that people are reading more. It's great that reading is seen as kind of a more attractive hobby lately. So I don't know. I don't know. But that is that. So we've got that. We've got the whole AI scenario, which I'm not versed enough on to speak of with any authority or really at all, but I'm definitely watching. I think a lot of people did point out that it was interesting that these authors, and these are like big authors that are kind of banded together on this lawsuit, but that they are suing independently and or with the Authors Guild, in that it didn't seem to be in tandem with publishers, because I believe I was also seeing things kind of making the rounds on, again, Twitter, so take everything with a grain of salt, but about HarperCollins potentially kind of testing out AI in-house. And I don't love that. I really don't. And HarperCollins is already kind of on my short list right now because of how long the strike was last year. I feel like it was too long, and I feel like that was a real good precursor to kind of where we've moved into this year. I think we saw obviously seated back then, and I'd be very interested to know if it would make even more noise now based on the WGA and the SAG strikes, or if it would still, in the sense that, would HarperCollins still be so slow to the table if they were going on strike now versus when they did, because of what we've seen with the WGA and SAG. Now, granted, we only see movement on that in the last couple of days, so I don't know, but it does seem like we're in a moment, aren't we? So we're going to keep supporting those unions, and hopefully they get everything on their wish list and we can continue talking about those projects. I know there are a lot of things coming out this fall and winter that we'll want to talk about ideally. Now, granted, there is one particularly large property that hasn't really announced anything officially that I've been kind of waiting to see, but at the same time have been hoping that we kind of hold off until the strikes are resolved. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect there. It is dinner time, isn't it? Now that I like really think about it, I got so used to eating later. I didn't even think about it being dinner time, and that maybe people wouldn't be able to pop on because of that. But you live and you learn. Maybe next time I'll actually put up a poll to see when people would be interested in popping over. If I do it again, maybe we're just not a live community. That is something that I can accept if true, but I really like the idea of hanging out with people and being able to talk more casually and generally about things. So I'm grateful when people pop on in whatever way is convenient and comfortable to them to be able to engage. So, yeah. If anyone has anything that they want to bring to the table, please do not be shy in mentioning. But those were the big things that I had on my brain coming into tonight, was the real person fan fiction issue, the that article, that Bustle article I mentioned, Banned Books Week, the AI of it all that seems to just be in everything in terms of part of a lot of these conversations. Sorry, I'm seeing my friend Sarah, who I'm still hoping that we'll have a conversation at some point about what stalks among us. That she had her first author event today, and she just posted about it. Seems to have gone well. So that's great. If you haven't read What Stalks Among Us yet, it's a really fun. Well, fun is a strong word because it is a horror, but it's a young adult horror novel about a couple of teenagers that get stuck in a haunted corn maze, but haunted in a weird way. If you watch the feature Friday, you know what I'm talking about, or if you read it, you definitely know what I'm talking about. Sorry if there's any drinking sounds associated with that can. Again, this is the Moore's beer, and I feel like they should make it, like I said, where this is the part you drink out of, where the front of the can faces out. I don't know. I don't I don't have packaging design knowledge. So what do I know? I don't know if you can hear the road noises at this point. I'm trying to gauge kind of what the sound situation is like. I'm really trying to hold off. Like I mentioned before, sorry, I've got a hair. I've been really indecisive about microphones, external microphones, and what to get. And then I've also been holding off for the Best Buy Black Friday sale. I'm not going to even lie to you about it. I mean, why would I lie about something like that? But so I don't know. I don't know how it's sounding, and I apologize if it's not as crisp or as clear as I ideally would like. Although I don't know if the like ambient sounds will also be an issue with a better microphone. I probably should have paid more attention in sound design class, which is a whole different kettle of fish, right? So you would not know, you would not know just dropping in that I did take video and sound beginner video and sound design editing back in the day. But and yet, I mean, in those days, we were still, as undergrads, filming on actual film. We weren't allowed to check out the digital cameras. So that's not saying much, but it is true, believe it or not. I surely wouldn't, but here we are. Tomorrow, I am filming. I want to say hopefully, but I have to. It has to happen. The excuse me, the October anticipated, which is just absolutely mind-boggling that we're here. I can't believe that we're already to October. And I know like adulthood feels like this circle of just saying I can't believe it's already whatever month again and again. And yet I really truly can't believe it. I mean, it's been a really weird year, like personally. Like I was laid off in February. I spent time looking for a new job. I started a new job. And now we're almost back to my birthday, which is not in October, but is shortly after on in November, early November. So I just I don't know. I don't know how we're here. So if anyone that also means that we're entering fall reading season clearly, or we're in it, really, we're in it. So if anyone has things that they would like to like talk about or recommendation videos potentially or anything that they're interested in terms of like fall reading or videos or discussions or what have you through the end of the year, let me know and I will take it under consideration and see where we can fit things and what we can do. So I'm so sorry. I feel I feel so boring for everyone, and I will hopefully become more interesting as I get more used to stuff like this, and as we kind of figure out what times work better for people in terms of hopping on as well, and how to, like, set things up. I, obviously just kind of scheduled something out based on my availability because people had indicated or someone had indicated that it would be beneficial to them to have some forewarning, which I definitely understand. So, still figuring out what all of this looks like. I feel like there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I don't know what that is. Oh, here's a question, I guess. Well, not really a question. This is me verbally justifying to myself. The new Emily Wilson translation of the Iliad just came out. I have not read the Odyssey translation yet, but I do have it. Hold on, sorry. I'm getting a notification. Okay, it's gone. All right, we're good. It just had like a Wi-Fi notification, and since I don't stream, I don't know what anything looks like, and then I get nervous. But I have the Odyssey translation in paperback, and the Iliad just came out this week, and I really want to grab it, even though I have not read my Odyssey translation yet, and I know I'm going to. But if anyone wants to just validate that for me. Like, I know that they're not gonna match because one will be in hardcover and one will be in paperback, and who knows when I'll even get to them, but I'm feeling kinda left out not grabbing it, and I almost kind of miss it because the Odyssey came out when I was a bookseller, and it was such a moment, like, everyone was coming in for that at my particular bookstore, and everyone was, like, so excited about it. Excuse me. And it was just a lot of fun. And it feels like there is still that excitement for this translation as there should be because it's a major moment, the first translation of the Iliad by a woman and what that perspective brings to the text. So I need to go out and buy it, but I know it's going to be a heftier hardcover. So part of me has been waiting, and I don't know if I'll have time this week because there's still like the one Barnes and Noble in the city proper, which is technically the DePaul bookstore downtown on State Street. So they generally would have probably the steepest discount available for it. But I don't know. I'll buy it eventually. Let's be real. Okay, well, I guess we'll hang out for a little bit longer. I don't want to keep anybody too much, and I don't know if anyone else is going to pop in or out, but I want to be available to have some more chats if possible, and if not, that is what it is. Okay, recommendations of banned books. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think I found, you know what? Actually, if I can figure out a way here, let me figure out a way to do I because I was gonna do some shorts potentially, but I can also probably just do a whole video potentially maybe. I'll figure something out, but I do take for granted that there is this idea of, like, what titles are banned. I know if you haven't watched any of and not all titles, to be clear, if you haven't watched any of Bookish Realms, like, coverage of book banning, information, it is really in depth and really excellent. She is coming at it from the perspective of a public librarian as well. So she has a real well in depth of knowledge that is excellent. I did find an article, I believe, out of the Atlantic yesterday because I was kind of like looking to see what some of the most challenged books are outside of the ALA does the top 10 every year. But I feel like that doesn't get as deep as I would like it to in the current environment and conversation because we have so many mid-list authors, particularly authors of color and LGBTQIA authors that are being very much impacted by these bans and these challenges because they're already mid-list. So there is this kind of conversation that happens a lot, and we've talked about this before, that if a book is banned, then people are going to seek it out and that's actually going to be better for the book. But we often are talking about that in relation to books that are already successful in whatever way, like things like The Handmaid's Tale or what have you. So those that are like more mid-list authors really can fall through the cracks sometimes because of that. And then they suffer in terms of sales, but also just, readers finding their stories. And so I will definitely do that in some form, some more recommendations of band titles. And I'm struggling a little bit in that I want to, be recommending those like more mid-list titles or the more underrated unknown titles or lesser known titles, but I haven't been reading as deeply in young adult the last couple of years as I have historically, and that means that I'm not quite as versed, but there are still a lot of titles on those lists that I do know and love. I was baffled is a strong word because nothing should surprise me anymore, but I was kind of shocked to see titles that were around when I was a kid, like Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging on these lists, presumably for kind of more, puberty related content. But the most common challenges definitely come down to LGBTQIA LGBTQIA plus themes, just existence, period, to be completely honest. Authors of color and complications and challenges of American history and the kind of quagmire of American history and the realities that are often not voiced. And when they are voiced, how that kind of complicates narratives and makes things uncomfy for some people in a way that they should be uncomfy for some people. And honestly, I was shocked by how many books that just seem to kind of look at the concept of bodies and how we exist in our bodies and move through puberty, like I said specifically, and just giving knowledge on things like our bodies. So obviously with that, also anything that really touches on abortion often gets challenged. So I am not nearly as versed as many or as I should be, but I want to keep the conversation going, obviously, and to be supporting these authors. So definitely something I will take under consideration. Thank you. And sorry for the tangent or the soapbox, the tangent on a soapbox. That's not what I intended by any means, but I think too, like, yeah, looking at that kind of difference, um, I find it interesting when you say nowhere near as bad here, because has there been like a ramp up as tangible in the rhetoric of book banning and like such conversations in the UK as well? I feel like I've heard, inklings of things, but not specifics, which again is my fault as well. All right. I apologize for the kind of loosey goosiness of this. We'll figure something out, or maybe we won't, and that's okay too. But thanks for anyone that popped on for whatever length of time or at all or what have you. Thank you, Phoebe, for chatting with me in the comments and being here. And yeah, maybe we'll do this again sometime soon if there's interest, and we'll figure out how to make it work for everybody. But thanks for hanging out, and we will see you next week. So yeah, all right. I'm gonna do this awkward kind of Midwestern goodbye where I kind of stand by the door for a second and make sure everyone's okay before I head out, and then go. Oh, real quick before we go. Okay, and that's great to hear that it's not as widespread of an issue, and I've talked about this before too. This idea that I am guilty of before the last however many years. It's been at least 3 that this is really amped up. Being a little bit more complacent around the idea of banned books and book banning, and that like banned books week felt like something you talked about, but not something that was an active threat. It was almost like quaint isn't the word, but it felt like a danger we had moved through in this kind of like timeline of forward momentum, and this idea of history presenting itself as a linear kind of narrative that it's not, and part of adulthood is realizing that it's not, unfortunately. Like, not one of my favorite realizations of adulthood, and yet here we are. So I am guilty of not having as been as aware of the active kind of threat of book banning. And I've also been I tried to watch part of, if not all, the Chicago Public Library has a YouTube channel, and they just had a conversation with the Secretary of State in Illinois and some higher ups in libraries in Illinois, whether it be the Chicago Public Library. I don't remember exactly who was on the conversation, but talking about book bannings, the kind of state of book banning, and like our rights in relation to book banning, because Illinois just passed a law that said that libraries that ban books are not eligible for public funding for those libraries. And that has received a lot of support. It's a definitive action that kind of combats book banning in a real, tangible way. And I really need to do some more research on the legislation, and particularly how librarians feel about the legislation, because I am in support of it. And at the same time, I'm very nervous for communities, especially like smaller communities, where the vocal minority could potentially cause havoc for an entire community and take away funding that is very needed for libraries in smaller communities as a public resource and a public good. So I don't know. And we haven't seen it happen yet, to be fair, that I am aware of. So I don't know what the fullness of that legislation looks like in terms of what it's doing. So another uneducated ramble there. I apologize, but something I'm very much keeping my eye on. And I think a lot of people nationally are keeping their eye on in terms of legislation. And I am very happy to be in a state that takes this very seriously and is actively trying to combat it, to be ahead of the problem in some ways, ahead of the problem, not really, because we've let it grow the last couple of years, but in terms of how we've gotten on some problems ahead. So I don't know. I'm again just babbling, but I really appreciate your thoughts there, and to also think about it internationally and kind of where the conversations are everywhere. Because yeah, and I do want to recognize that a lot of these challenges and a lot of the articles we've seen coming out around book banning are really illustrating that this is a vocal minority. Most people in the country disagree with book banning. You know, that used to be an issue we could all be pretty united on in terms of disagreeing with. And so that's definitely something that I take comfort in knowing, but at the same time, this vocal minority is wielding a lot more power than they should be in that way, in terms of taking narratives and resources away from vulnerable communities and also just communities that need to know these stories and need to have a wider knowledge base or experience base, empathy base. So that is part of it as well. Also, a conversation I was thinking about having later this week, we'll see, is kind of the difference between criticism and censorship, because I feel like that is a kind of ditch that some of us have been falling into online. And as I said earlier this year when I talked about both bad reviews, I think no, in the video where I talked about bad reviews, criticism isn't fun. I recognize that. I don't like conflict. I get it, but it's not censorship. So, maybe stay tuned on that. I won't go off on another tangent here, but it may be a tangent I go off on in the future. So, yeah. All right. I will I open my earring. This is what happens when your earrings can be a something you fiddle with. There we go. All right. All right. So thank you for anyone that hung out, like I said, for any portion of this evening, or anyone that is hanging out in the future for any portion. But yeah, I appreciate it. As I always say, I don't take your time for granted, your attention for granted, your community for granted, your engagement for granted. It does mean a lot. So anyway, that's where we're sitting figuratively, but leave your thoughts in whatever way below. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you later this week. All right.